I still remember that Sunday morning with a clarity that feels both sacred and profane. It was the day the scales fell from my eyes, not with a violent tearing, but with the gentle, final weight of a truth I could no longer deny. The house was steeped in a quiet so profound it felt like a held breath. Golden sunlight, thick as honey, spilled through the large bay window of our dining room, catching motes of dust that danced like forgotten memories. It was a beautiful, serene scene, the kind I had once curated with such hope. A perfect still life, a masterpiece of domestic bliss. But that morning, the beauty was a veneer. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was hollow. I lay in our king-sized bed, the expanse of Egyptian cotton between me and Daniel's side feeling less like a space and more like a chasm. I reached out, my fingers brushing the cold, pristine linen. Cold. For the third morning in a row. The first time, I'd concocted a story for myself. A late night at the office. Him stumbling into the guest room to avoid waking me. The second time, the story grew thinner, more brittle. This third time, the narrative shattered entirely, leaving only the cold, hard porcelain of reality. I rose, my bare feet silent on the polished oak floors. The house, our dream home, was a testament to my efforts. Every throw pillow was plumped, every surface gleamed, every art book was angled with precise care. It was perfect, like something ripped from the glossy pages of an architectural digest. But as I walked through the sterile living room and into the sleek, minimalist kitchen, the truth echoed in the emptiness. This wasn't a home, it was a museum. A beautifully arranged, lifeless museum dedicated to a marriage that had quietly died, its corpse preserved under glass for appearances. My morning ritual was a study in automated motion. Grind the beans. The whirring sound was obscenely loud in the silence. Boil the water, pour it slowly, watching the dark liquid bloom and swirl in the French press. The rich, aromatic scent usually comforted me. Today, it just smelled like betrayal. And then I saw it. His coffee cup from yesterday sitting unwashed in the sink. A small, domestic oversight. But Daniel was fastidious. He always rinsed his cup and placed it in the dishwasher before bed. My eyes, sharpened by a new, terrible lucidity, zeroed in on the rim. There, stark against the white porcelain, was a lipstick mark. A smudge of a deeper, bolder red than I had ever worn. It shimmered faintly, a waxy crimson crescent. Not my shade, not my lipstick. My hands, which had been steady through the grinding and pouring, began to tremble. A fine, almost imperceptible vibration. I placed my own clean mug down on the counter with a soft click, my knuckles white. I stared at that mark, this flag planted on the territory of my life, and I waited for the tsunami of grief, the earthquake of rage. It didn't come. Instead, a wave of pure, unadulterated relief washed over me, so powerful it left me lightheaded. It was the relief of a diagnosis after months of terrifying symptoms, the relief of a suspicion, nursed in the dark corners of my mind, finally growing a face. The phantom had a name now, or at least a shade of lipstick. It was no longer my imagination. It was real. And in its reality, I found my footing. For months, maybe a year, I had been the curator of my own ignorance. I had pretended not to notice the faint floral ghost of an unfamiliar perfume on his collar. I had accepted the emergency meetings that stretched past midnight, the business trips that seemed to multiply. I had watched him angle his phone away from me, his thumbs flying over the screen, and had swallowed the questions that rose like bile in my throat. He thought I was naive, a simple, trusting wife, content with her beautiful cage. That perception, I realized with a cold, sharp clarity, was my greatest asset. It made me invisible. It made me safe to betray. When he came home that night, the air in the museum shifted. I heard his key in the lock, the sigh he always gave upon entering, as if shedding the weight of the world. I was in the living room, reading a book I wasn't processing. "Elena," he said, his voice a careful blend of weariness and normalcy. I looked up and smiled. It was the same smile I had practiced for 1,000 evenings. "Daniel, long night?" He avoided my eyes, hanging his coat with excessive focus. "Yeah, you know how it is. The Henderson account is a nightmare. Meeting ran late, then we had to go over the figures again." He leaned in to kiss my cheek, his lips a dry, brief pressure. I caught the faintest hint of that floral perfume again. I nodded, the picture of wifely understanding. "I'll get you some coffee." I rose and walked to the kitchen, my movements smooth, rehearsed. As I poured the dark brew into his favorite mug, I felt something inside me click into place. A quiet, irrevocable decision. It was the sound of a lock turning, of a gate closing. If betrayal was a game he was playing, then I was done being the pawn on his board. I would become the player. No, I would become the board itself. That night, as he slept the untroubled sleep of the uncaught, I lay beside him, staring at the stippled ceiling. The moonlight painted silver bars across the bed. His breathing was even, his face relaxed in slumber, a face I had once loved with a ferocity that frightened me. Now I looked at him and saw a stranger. A strategic problem to be solved. "You've taken everything from me, Daniel," I whispered into the stillness, my voice a feather against stone. "My love, my trust, the future we painted. Now, I'll take back control." And so, my secret war began. It was not a war of frontal assaults, but of guerrilla tactics. A war fought in the shadows of our shared life, with silence and perception as my weapons. The first true intelligence came a week later. He was in the shower, and his phone, his precious password-protected talisman, buzzed on the nightstand. A notification glowed on the screen. I didn't hesitate. I picked it up. The message was from a number not saved in his contacts. "Last night was heaven. I miss you already. Can't stop thinking about you. C. C. A single damning initial. My heart didn't race. It slowed, becoming a cold, steady drum. I memorized the 10-digit number, searing it into my memory. Then, I placed the phone back exactly as it was, the screen angled just so. I didn't cry. I didn't smash the phone against the wall. I simply stood there, a general receiving the first map of the enemy's territory. By that afternoon, I knew her. Catherine Miller. A few deft searches on his company's website, a foray into social media with a carefully crafted anonymous profile, and she materialized from the digital ether. She worked in the mergers and acquisitions department at his firm. A vice president. Smart, undoubtedly. Her photos showed a woman with a bold, confident smile, expensively highlighted hair, and a penchant for tailored sheath dresses in jewel tones. She was married, too. Her husband, Richard Miller, was a partner at a different, prestigious law firm, a serious-looking man with kind eyes in his profile picture. They lived in a penthouse apartment with a stunning city view, a woman who had everything, yet wanted what was in my museum. Perfect. Because now she had something that belonged to me, and I was going to take it back, not through pleas or tears, but through reclamation. My strategy evolved in phases. The first was infiltration. I joined his firm's annual charity gala committee. It was a simple, wifely thing to do. When I mentioned it to Daniel, he seemed pleased, even relieved. See? His little wife engaging in harmless social activities. It fit his narrative. The first committee meeting was held in a bright, airy conference room on the top floor of his building. I wore a soft, dove-gray dress, playing the part of the gentle, supportive spouse. And there she was, Catherine, in the flesh. She was more vibrant in person, her laughter a little too loud, her gestures a little too expansive. She commanded the room. Our eyes met across the polished table. I offered a small, polite smile, the one I'd been perfecting for years. She smiled back, a flash of white teeth and professional warmth. But in that brief, electric moment, something silent and significant passed between us. A recognition. She knew who I was, and I knew what she was. Neither of us said a word, but the battlefield was defined. Phase 2 was psychological warfare. I began a campaign of subtle mirroring. I started wearing the colors Daniel had always complimented on her in photos: deep emerald green, a rich sapphire blue. I bought a bottle of the perfume I'd smelled on his shirts, a scent called Black Orchid, and wore it sparingly, so it was just a ghost on my skin, a confusing echo for him to catch. I changed my hair, just slightly, adding layers that framed my face in a way that was reminiscent of her style. I watched him notice. I saw the flicker of confusion in his eyes when he came home and I was wearing a crimson blouse, a color I'd never worn before, a color I knew from her Instagram was her favorite. He didn't comment, but his gaze lingered a second too long. One evening, as we ate a silent dinner, he finally broke. "You're different lately, Elena. Everything okay?" I looked straight into his eyes, my gaze steady and unblinking. "Never better, Daniel." I saw the unease root itself in him then. It was a small, fragile plant, but I would water it diligently. He began to flinch when his phone buzzed. He started watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, a new wariness in his expression. I didn't need confrontation. I wanted this. The slow, creeping fear. The fear that lives in silence, that grows in the cracks of a perfectly constructed world. Revenge, I was learning, isn't loud. It's not about shouting or breaking things. It's about control. And I was seizing it, piece by silent piece. I made him depend on me again, twisting his reliance into my weapon. I would forget to pack his lunch, then show up at his office unexpectedly with a beautifully prepared meal, just in time for him to see the flash of panic in Catherine's eyes as I sweetly greeted her in the hallway. I would misplace a file he needed for a crucial meeting, letting him sweat for an hour before finding it exactly where he'd left it, saving the day with a serene smile. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Elena," he said one night, the words dripping with a sincerity that was both ironic and pathetic. I smiled. "I'm sure you'd manage," I said softly, the double meaning hanging in the air between us. Soon, he really wouldn't know what to do without me, but not in the way he thought. Behind the smile, the web was growing. The charity gala arrived. I wore a gown of liquid silver, a deliberate contrast to the vibrant colors Catherine favored. I was the moon to her sun. And that night, I met Richard Miller. Fate, it seems, has a wicked sense of timing. We found ourselves next to each other at the bar, both waiting for drinks, both momentarily alone in a sea of couples. "The champagne is surprisingly good," I said, offering a small, polite opening. He turned, and I saw the same quiet intelligence I'd seen in his photo, but also a profound sadness etched around his eyes. "Is it? I'll have to take your word for it. I'm a Scotchman myself." "Richard, isn't it?" I extended a hand. "Elena, Daniel's wife." A flicker of something, recognition, pity, solidarity, crossed his face as he took my hand. "Of course, a pleasure." We made small talk about the charity, the city, the unseasonably warm weather. It was all surface, a dance of polite society, but beneath the banalities, a deeper conversation was happening. In the careful pauses, the way our eyes strayed to where our spouses were standing a little too close together on the dance floor, in the shared weary understanding that passed between us. We were two people reading the same tragic book, just on different chapters. We didn't speak of it directly. Not then. But a week later, a message appeared on my phone from an unknown number. "We should talk. R." We met in a quiet, anonymous park. The conversation was not one of hysterical alliance, but of cold, clinical strategy. Two intelligent, wounded people comparing notes. "I've suspected for 6 months," he said, his voice low and steady. "She's been careless with her credit card bills, hotel charges, expensive gifts she couldn't explain." "I found the lipstick," I said simply. He nodded, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "What do you want to do?" I looked out at the children playing on the swings, their laughter a stark contrast to our grim counsel. "I don't want a messy divorce. I don't want to scream. I want them to feel the same quiet, systematic dismantling that we have. I want consequences, not the kind a court can provide, but the kind that ruins the life they've built for themselves. Richard smiled then, a thin, grim line. I have access to certain financial records and a friend in IT at their firm. And so the plan was forged. We would expose them with the precision of a surgical strike. We gathered evidence not as heartbroken spouses, but as prosecutors building a case. Richard provided bank statements showing transfers from Daniel to a secret account of Catherine's, payments for a rented apartment they used. He obtained security footage from the building's garage. I provided timelines, photos from Daniel's phone, accessed one night with a guest password, our old dog's name, and a detailed log of his lies. At home, the performance continued. I was an actress playing the role of a lifetime, and Daniel was my willing, arrogant audience. Every meal I cooked was his favorite. Every smile was a lie. Every time he touched me, my skin crawled. But I leaned into it, making him believe his deception was still secure. I was laying the groundwork for the ultimate shock. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I would look at my reflection in the dark window and wonder who I had become. The quiet, accommodating wife was gone. In her place was a woman of steel and shadow, a strategist who had learned to destroy with a whisper. By the time our dossier was complete, a strange metamorphosis had occurred. The desire to simply hurt him had faded, replaced by something colder, more absolute. I didn't want to wound Daniel. I wanted to own him. Not his love, that was ashes, but his silence, his fear, his future, and that I discovered was a far more satisfying form of vengeance. The endgame was set for a Friday, his birthday. I planned the dinner with meticulous care. The table was a masterpiece. Starched white linen, our best crystal, a centerpiece of white orchids. Candles flickered, casting dancing shadows. Soft jazz played in the background. I wore a dress of devastating fire engine red, Catherine's signature color. When he arrived, his eyes lit up with a possessive pride. He saw the beautiful table, the expensive wine, his beautiful wife in a stunning dress. He saw a celebration of him. He kissed my cheek, his breath smelling of the scotch he'd had with colleagues after work. "You look incredible, Elena. All this for me?" "Of course," I said, my voice a silken cord. "It's your day." We ate. We made small talk. He was expansive, cheerful, basking in the illusion of his perfect life. He talked about a promotion on the horizon, a new car he was thinking of buying. He was at the pinnacle of his world, utterly unaware that the foundation had already been dynamited. Halfway through the main course, as he was regaling me with a story about a difficult client, I reached beside my chair and pulled out a simple, legal-sized manila envelope. I slid it across the tablecloth, the sound a soft whisper of finality. He paused mid-sentence, looking down at it with bemused curiosity. "What's this?" "Your gift," I said, my smile not faltering. He chuckled, wiping his mouth with his napkin. "You shouldn't have." He tore open the envelope and pulled out the contents. The top sheet was a high-resolution photograph of him and Catherine, taken from the security footage Richard had acquired. They were laughing, his hand on the small of her back, guiding her into a hotel elevator. The color drained from his face with a swiftness that was almost medical. His jaw went slack. He flicked to the next photo, them kissing in a dimly lit parking garage, and the next, a screenshot of a bank transfer. He shuffled through them, his hands beginning to shake, the papers rustling like dry leaves. "Elena," he choked out, his voice strangled. "My God, I can explain." I raised my hand, a gentle, silencing gesture. The calmness in my own voice was a power in itself. "No, Daniel, I'm not here to listen. I'm here to end it." He looked at me, truly looked at me, and for the first time, he saw the woman I had become. Not the naive wife, but the architect of his ruin. The terror in his eyes was not born of guilt, but of the terrifying realization that he had never known me at all, that he had been playing checkers while I was playing chess. What "What do you want?" he whispered. I leaned forward, the candlelight catching the red of my dress, making me look, I hoped, like an avenging angel. "Your company already knows. Catherine's husband sent the entire file to the board and HR this morning. You might want to check your emails." The crumble was not dramatic. It was a total systemic collapse. His shoulders slumped, his head bowed, and a low, guttural sound escaped his lips. He was a puppet with his strings cut. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers clumsy, and the glowing screen confirmed his doom. His face turned a sickly gray. He tried to speak again, to form some word of apology or plea, but I stood up. I looked down at him, this broken man amidst the ruins of our beautiful dinner. "I won't scream," I said, my voice clear and carrying in the silent room. "I won't beg. I won't forgive you. But you'll remember every quiet moment of this dinner for the rest of your life. You'll remember the taste of the wine, the sound of the music, and the exact look on my face as I walked away from you." And I did. I turned and walked out of the dining room, through the pristine living room, and out the front door of the museum. I didn't take a coat. I didn't look back. As I closed the heavy oak door behind me, the click of the latch was the sound of a chapter ending. I got into my car and drove. The city lights blurred past my windshield like melting stars. There were no tears. My eyes were dry, my hands steady on the wheel. I felt weightless, not happy, not free in a joyous way, but unburdened. The great, crushing weight of pretense had been lifted. My phone buzzed in my purse, once, twice, 10 times. I let it. Later, I listened to the voicemails. His voice traveled the predictable trajectory. Shock. "Elena, what have you done?" To guilt. "It was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake." To desperate begging. "Please, I love you. We can fix this. I need you." I deleted them one by one. "No, Daniel. A mistake is adding salt instead of sugar to your coffee. What you did was a series of conscious, calculated choices. And now, you face the consequences of mine." I rented a small, sun-drenched apartment across town. It was the antithesis of the museum, filled with second-hand furniture, piles of books, and plants that I sometimes forgot to water. It was messy, and lived in, and mine. For days, I did nothing but sleep with the window open, letting the sounds of the city, sirens, laughter, traffic, lull me to sleep. They were the sounds of life, real and uncurated. The fallout was swift and public. Richard, as it turned out, was a formidable enemy. He didn't just send the evidence to the firm, he engaged a powerful legal team. Daniel was suspended, then quietly forced to resign. The story, juicy and full of corporate intrigue, leaked to the press. Catherine's marriage imploded on the social pages of the city's newspapers. I didn't gloat. I sat in my new apartment, sipping tea, and watched it unfold on my laptop with the detached interest of a sociologist. It was a strange, calm justice. But revenge is a chain reaction. It leaves echoes in its wake. One evening, a month after I'd left, the doorbell of my apartment rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Daniel. He was a ghost of his former self. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes were hollowed out by sleepless nights, and his confident posture was gone, replaced by a defeated stoop. I opened the door, but left the chain on. "Elena," he breathed, his voice ragged. "Please, can I come in? Just to talk." I studied him through the narrow gap. This broken man who had once made me feel small and invisible now seemed pitifully so himself. "I lost everything," he whispered, his eyes pleading. "My job, my reputation. Catherine, please, I need you." For a single haunting moment, I felt the faintest stir of pity. It was the pity one might feel for a rabid dog, dangerous but doomed. "You didn't lose everything, Daniel," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You just lost the illusion that you were untouchable. You lost the woman you thought was too simple to fight back." He reached a hand through the gap, trying to touch mine. I stepped back out of reach. "Leave, Daniel. You taught me in the most painful way possible what love isn't. Now you need to let me learn what peace is." The light in his eyes died completely. He nodded, a slow, pathetic motion, and turned away. As I watched his heavy, retreating form disappear down the hallway, I realized the final profound truth. I wasn't angry anymore. The fire had burned itself out. And once you stop wanting someone to suffer, you realize they already are, trapped in the prison of their own making. The weeks and months that followed were a period of strange, quiet discovery. For the first time in over a decade, my life belonged solely to me. There were no routines built around his schedule, no meals planned to his preferences, no waiting by the phone for a call that might not come. The silence in my apartment was no longer hollow, it was fertile. I took a job at a small, independent design studio. The pay was modest, the work was sometimes tedious, but it was mine. I found a profound joy in the small autonomous acts of my new life. Choosing what to have for breakfast, buying flowers simply because I liked them, striking up conversations with strangers in coffee shops without the fear of saying the wrong thing. Sometimes I caught whispers at work. "That's her, the one whose husband had the affair with the VP. It was all over the news." I didn't correct them. I didn't confirm it. Let them have their stories. Their words were like rain on a raincoat. They no longer seeped through to my skin. Then, one Tuesday, I saw Catherine. It was in a small, hip cafe near my studio. She was sitting alone at a corner table, and the sight of her was a shock. The bold, polished woman was gone. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore no makeup, and her eyes were red and puffy. Her hands trembled as she stirred her latte, the spoon clinking a frantic, nervous rhythm against the ceramic. She didn't see me at first. I ordered my coffee, and as I turned to leave, I found my path taking me directly past her table. Our eyes met. There was no smile, no glare, just a raw, unguarded moment of mutual recognition. We were two ships that had collided in the night, both now wrecked on different shores. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel hate. I felt a vast, oceanic sorrow for both of us, for the lives we had shattered in our collision. I offered her a small, gentle smile. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't cruel. It was simply an acknowledgement, a quiet signal that the war was over. Then I walked out into the sunlight, the bell on the door jingling behind me. That was the moment I truly understood. Revenge had never been about making her suffer. It had been about taking back what she had helped herself to. My power, my dignity, my right to my own narrative. That night, I stood before the full-length mirror in my bedroom. I looked at my reflection, the lines around my eyes that spoke of both pain and resilience, the set of my jaw that had learned firmness, the calm in my own gaze. I did not see the woman Daniel had betrayed. I did not see a victim. I saw a survivor, a woman who had walked through fire and had emerged, not scarred, but tempered. Strength, I realized, doesn't come from the act of vengeance itself. It comes from the profound act of reclaiming yourself from the ashes. The next morning, I sat down at my computer. I opened the folder labeled Evidence, and without a second thought, selected every file, every photo, every screenshot, every saved message, and sent them to the digital void. I emptied the trash. For the first time, my heart felt not just light, but clean. Months turned into a year. Daniel's name faded from the headlines, but the whispers in the industry were a permanent stain. He was blacklisted, his reputation in tatters. He tried to start his own consulting firm, but it floundered. Catherine had left the city altogether, a ghost in the wind. One evening, as I was sketching ideas for a new client, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "I'm sorry, Elena. I hope you're happy. I really do. Daniel." I read it once, then again. I felt no anger, no residual sadness, just a distant academic empathy, the kind you might extend to a character in a novel you finished long ago. He was a story that was no longer mine. I did not reply. He didn't deserve the closure of a response. My silence was the final, perfect sentence of our story. A month later, I drove past our old house on a whim. A large "sold" sign was staked in the perfect lawn. The sight of it, that beautiful museum, caused a single, sharp pang in my heart, a fleeting grief for the dreams that had once lived within those walls. And then, I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that bubbled up from my chest. Because I realized I no longer saw it as my home. It was just a house. My home was the messy, sunlit apartment filled with my own things, my own life. Life has a strange symmetry. The man who had once pitied my quiet simplicity now surely envied the profound peace it had ultimately granted me. He had lost everything that money could buy, the job, the car, the status. And I had gained everything it couldn't, a sense of self, an unshakable peace, a hard-won joy. In the quiet of my new life, I started to write. At first it was just a journal, a way to untangle the complex knot of my emotions. But soon, the words began to form themselves into stories. Stories about women who smiled while they planned their escape. About pain that was not an end, but a forge. About silence that was louder than any scream. One of these stories, a piece I called "The Curator's Exit," I posted online under a pseudonym. It went viral. Readers were captivated by the calm, calculated protagonist. They called it a masterclass in quiet revenge. The story of the wife who vanished without a sound. No one knew it was me. That anonymity, that secret power to tell my truth without the burden of my name, was sweeter than any public vindication could ever have been. Daniel might have been the one to shatter my marriage, but in his carelessness, he had unknowingly laid the foundation for my rebirth. A year and a half after I walked out of that dinner, I stood on a windswept cliff overlooking the ocean. It was the same spot where, a lifetime ago, Daniel had gotten down on one knee and promised me forever. The waves below were wild, relentless, and brutally honest. They crashed against the rocks without apology or disguise. I closed my eyes and breathed in the cold, salt-tanged air, and for the first time, my mind was utterly still. I didn't think about him. I didn't think about revenge, or Catherine, or the pain. I didn't think about proving a point. I was just a woman, standing by the sea, breathing. I just was. People are wrong about revenge. They think it provides closure. It doesn't. Closure is something you grant yourself. Revenge provides clarity. It strips away the illusions, the excuses, the comforting lies. And in that stark, unforgiving clarity, you find the raw materials to build your peace. I have rebuilt my life, piece by deliberate piece. I saved my money, and now my name, Elena Vance, my maiden name, is painted on the door of my own small, successful design studio. I have friends who laugh with me, not at me. I have a life that is full and vibrant on my own terms. And sometimes, when a new client, usually a woman, sits in my office and shares a story of her own heartbreak, her eyes searching mine for a sign of understanding, I simply smile a soft, knowing smile and say, let's just say, I learned the value of silence. Because silence, I've learned, can be the loudest sound in the world. It's the space where you hear your own voice again. It's the void into which you can speak your new truth. Every now and then, a letter arrives from Daniel, forwarded from my old address. They are always the same. Apologies wrapped in nostalgia, pleas wrapped in self-pity. I never open them. I mark them, return to sender. Not out of cruelty, but because some stories are meant to be finished, some doors are meant to stay closed. If there is one thing the fire taught me, it is this. Betrayal does not define you. It reveals you. It strips you down to your core, and how you choose to rise from those ashes. That is what defines you. And I rose. Quietly, completely, beautifully. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of violet and gold, I whispered my gratitude to the wind, a secret for the waves to carry out to sea. Thank you for breaking me, I said, because now I know who I am. Then I smiled, not the careful, practiced smile of the museum wife, but the real, easy, unforced smile of a woman who had turned her pain into peace, and her silence into an unassailable fortress of power.